I'm going to be giving a talk about something quite different from what Scott and Marty were just talking about. So again, this is not a tutorial on Figma or a 101 or really anything like that. It's more about our agency, Tundra, or more so my attempts and some of the designers' attempts to introduce Figma as a tool that we can use at our agency. So yeah, I'll be going through that with Notorious big themed talk, and every slide, similar to these guys, is kind of just a Biggie Smalls track that I'm going to make up some stuff to talk about. So yeah, as you've already seen, I'm Adam Brock. I'm a senior front-end developer officially at Tundra. I change my title all the time on Slack. So at the moment, I'm editor-in-chief. So this is me today. Yeah, we don't take him too seriously. Like our tech director I mentioned before, he's the technical director of the company. His client-facing role is junior front-end developer at the moment. So we really don't take it too seriously. And I think that just makes it easier for us to be more adaptive to work with other disciplines and actually take on parts of the job that may not be in the official job description. So that's kind of the way we roll there. Yeah, so I work at Tundra. We're a leading digital agency in Collingwood. If you saw my last talk, I was talking a lot about the Nike account. That's my team's biggest account. I personally spend a lot of time there, and a lot of the designers who are in the crowd as well from Tundra would spend their time as well. And obviously, I co-run the DesignOps meetup with Chan. And yeah, we're the most dangerous design meetup in Melbourne. So kick in the door. Great track, but also this is a question that I received quite a lot at the last meetup. So when we had the informal catch up, I was getting people from varying companies, so big companies, big agencies, product companies, and it was effectively a version of this question. So things aren't that great at my workplace, but I don't even know where to start to change them. And I think this seems to be a really common problem. And I want to try and hopefully address that a little bit. I don't have all the answers. This is based on the last 2 months, I guess, all these things I'm going to be talking about from my perspective related to Figma specifically. So the everyday struggle. So the design workflow is broken for most places, almost every place actually. It's broken in one way or another. As Scott and Marty said, like even with their workflow, which I really, really like, you know, there is probably 1 or 2 spots that it's not perfect, and it will never be perfect, but there's degrees of that, and a lot of companies are more perfect than others, and some are just on the other extreme too. So I think we do have this everyday struggle as designers and as developers, and the both combined, where it's obvious that it's broken, but it's not obvious how we get past those things that are broken. And as these guys kind of said before, they learned to live with those things, like the 20 folder deep versioning, manual versioning of folders and things like that. So there seems to be more of a tendency to get comfortable with these problems rather than putting things in place to try and sort of leap over them. And I think that's a bit of a problem. So I'm just going to talk about this for a second. So Things Done Changed, again, pretty cool track, but it's really relevant to right now. So we are in a spot where things have changed as a designer, as a developer. Actually, everything's just completely changed. And if you look at the future of these trends, they're not fads, they're trends. They've been happening for a while and they will continue to happen. And a few of these are pretty obvious to me. So the first one is quite a big one. So collaboration. This is just, if you look at the tooling that is coming out, they're building in collaboration to these tools. So this is something that is being more widely used and more widely requested for projects and for designers. So this is getting built in. So everything from other tools like Google Docs, so that's obviously a very collaborative environment. Slack is very collaborative. Figma clearly is very collaborative, but there is a trend where things are getting more collaborative rather than this siloed workflow that a lot of people are used to. And decentralization is another important one where, yeah, like these guys, they don't work next to the developers. They have to be able to work in a decentralized way where their developer can be in, you know, Canada or in another country and still be able to have a really good workflow. So decentralization, I think, is another really important one. And iteration. We have to be able to make iterations quickly that don't go through this crazy process of, you know, generating those flats, generating the 40 pages, getting that, you know, to 95% and then presenting it to the client as a finished product and then being so shocked when they don't like some of it. You think you've perfected this design, but you're actually back to, I have this joke where it's like, oh, how's the design going? Yeah, I'm about like 90% done. It's like, cool, oh, so you're halfway there. Because like it's gonna go back. It's not done based on client feedback or internal feedback. It just doesn't really work that way. So the fundamental way of how we need to work and how we are working is changing. It's already been changing and it will continue to change. This is not something that's just a little blip, and we kind of like this idea of collaborating and being able to make fast iterations. This is something that will only increase with time. So I think acknowledging that is quite important. So with that being said, somebody's got to die. So in our case, again, we're big fans of Sketch. We have been using it for a couple of years full time. We got off of Photoshop quite a while ago. And ironically, the switch from Photoshop to Sketch was fairly similar to what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So you can basically take that and apply it to how we did it back then. And Alex, wherever he went, he's probably gone home. He's probably sick of this meetup by now. But he was actually pivotal in, oh, there you are. He was actually pivotal in the switch from Photoshop to Sketch as well. I vividly remember a walk like back from like Allpress or something, and you're like, man, like, Sketch, all this, I can't wait until we can use it. And it's like, what are you waiting for? Like, you're, the most senior designer or whatever. Do not speak bad things about that man. You did it outside, not in front of me. Anyway, so it's just like, these designers who are very senior or are very knowledgeable, they still feel like they're being held back, or they don't feel like they're the ones who can make that decision. And I just think that's so sad because it's holding back very smart people who have really good ideas or want to change things. So going back to Cali, so we looked into a tool that could resolve a lot of these problems that I think everyone's familiar with. I'm not going to go down the laundry list of all the problems that we have with something like Sketch or that kind of workflow. But Figma immediately just jumped out to me. So I'll expand a little bit on what those guys talked about. But as I said before, it's effectively a Google Docs version of a design tool. So it's based on this collaborative nature that's built into it. It's not like a plugin you have to install. They've built it from the ground up that way. But for me, the most important feature of it is that it is built using web technologies. This is not a native Mac OS platform like Sketch is. You can't install that on Windows or Linux or whatever. The fact that they've built this from the ground up in the web using web technologies, like it seems like not many people acknowledge that as being such a huge deal. They are 2 to 3 years ahead of any other design tool just on that fact alone. It's such a big deal, and I'll be touching on a couple of reasons why in a second. But from a development perspective, it's just such a cool starting point for them over any other tool. So yeah, the sky is really the limit. So if I just kind of delve deep a little bit on my initial impressions and my gradual learnings of Figma and thoughts on it, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Chan said our mission is kind of to reduce the distance between design and development to 0. And I truly believe this tool will be pivotal in helping us do that. So there's a couple of things of note. So Figma 3.0 was just released, I think 2 weeks ago, as these guys touched on. So it offers a whole new range of features. I'd encourage you to check out the release notes from Figma. They did a really good blog post covering off all those things, but there's a couple of things that really stood out to me. And Mark, wherever you are, over there, Mark McManus from Tundra, he showed me a demo last Thursday, I think it was, or last Friday. And I was about to go to a meeting actually, and he showed me at his desk, he had a couple of days booked in to play around with these new Figma features. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, my God, this is a graphical representation of my code base. Like the style sort of tools that they have for typography and colors and layout, all these sort of variables, in my mind, I was just racing to, this is a one-to-one representation of what a code base would kind of look like in this as a design system or a code base of components. So that was just a really immediate shock to me. And I think the other underrated thing, which is half out, so Figma, again, being a web-based tool, it's so cool because you can integrate with it via web technology. So you can actually have an API set up where at the moment they've done half the puzzle. So as of now, you can, from a development environment, access a design file or a project in Figma and read the contents of that file in a JSON format or in a web-friendly format. So for a developer, being able to access all of the information from that design file and have it translated into a language that's native to their code base is just really incredible. And the Figma team themselves have already done a proof of concept of this, where they have actually written something where you can read from your project file, and this application they've built will translate that into actual React components like production code, which is quite incredible. And I know Sketch can do this using, Create Sketch app and all that sort of stuff, but this is really the native layer of Figma. And that's half the puzzle. So again, this is very, very new stuff to Figma as well. But if you realize the implications of that and the power of that looking forward, it's quite incredible. So as of right now, again, you can look it up. There's a whole bunch of use cases that people have already started building. So you can generate a style guide on the fly, automatically based on your Figma files and all that kind of stuff. But the really exciting part is the R.I.P.D API. So sometime in the next 6 months, they've said that they're actually going to be releasing a R.I.P.D API. So at the moment we can read from design files, but they're going to be closing that loop by allowing us as developers or anyone who's writing code to actually do it the other way. So I'll be able to take my code base and I'll be able to push stuff from that code base back into my Figma file. So this is quite literally closing the loop between my design environment and my development environment. And I personally believe that the current version, which they've done a proof of concept of, having the design get converted into React components is not a great way. Like that shouldn't be the end goal. The highest fidelity version of the product should always be the source of truth, which is the development environment, the production environment. So being able to read from that development environment and convert that back into Figma, or convert it from your website into Figma, and then make updates in Figma and have those changes in Figma be pushed back up to the development environment, almost effectively using it as a graphical representation of your design system, your design, is a very, very powerful idea. And I truly believe we're going to be getting somewhere close to that. And again, this won't happen overnight. This might take 12 to 24 months, but the development community loves this kind of stuff. And I will personally be working on trying to get this working as well. So I think it's just really the direction where everything's heading. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So even I guess the existing implementation of this, which is probably one of the closer versions with the React, Create React sort of Sketch app. So I know Mark, who gave a talk here a few months ago, they've integrated into their build pipeline where when they do a build, it basically pushes the production code into a Sketch file. So it effectively generates a Sketch library or a Sketch file. They call it a Sketch. It's almost Sketch. It works in Sketch. But it's actually rendering production code into Sketch. So you can edit all those components directly in Sketch, but they're being generated from code. So it's a one-to-one with your production environment. But again, unfortunately, it only goes one way. We need to kind of close that loop. So yeah, with all that technical stuff aside, this is more about the process of getting this stuff changed. So ready to die. You have to be ready to die for this stuff. If you truly believe in something, so let's say you're still on Photoshop, and this is a real use case. Someone I won't name in the crowd who I'm kind of looking at directly, he's at a very big agency, only joined there a few months ago. They just switched from Photoshop to Sketch 8 weeks ago or something like that. This is an extremely big company. And if you know that Sketch is probably a better alternative to Photoshop, it may or may not be an easy sell. But if you really believe that that is the better alternative, and you're ready to die for that idea, I think that's a really good place to start. So you have to be willing to kind of stand up for what you think is good. So I have a little quote here. So to sell your soul is the easiest thing in the world. That's what everybody does every hour of his life. If I asked you to keep your soul, would you understand why that's much harder? So I really like this quote. It's from a book called The Fountainhead, and it's from the main character, Howard Rourke, who he's just got a very extreme level of integrity, because he knows that on a long enough timeline, you're going to regret it if you just do sell out every time and you don't stand up for what you think is the right thing to do. So my approach here is, one part of it is to get some help. So you don't have to do this on your own. So Notorious Thugs, I guess the point of this is there's other smart people in your company or your agency who thinks similar to you. They might not be obvious, but you can find them by talking to them. So you want to find a few smart Mavericks who are willing to kind of put themselves out there a little bit and help you with this cause of implementing change. So yeah, that's kind of one of the things I did recently at Tundra. So I'll give a shout out to Kaylee and Mark and Elliot as well. So they've been really, really supportive of helping me try out Figma as a design tool. I'm not a designer at work anymore. I used to be a designer. I'm not on the design tools anymore, but these guys are. So I really value their opinion of Figma as a design tool, and I wanted to work with them as a developer to see how that integrates into my workflow as well. So it's really a bit of a back and forth. And so just playing. So I think to get this to work, you really have to build in a 20% expected failure rate from the start. And failure is not in a bad sense at all. So, you know, again, I think there's a level of fear. Oh, if I do this, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to get in trouble? I think you need to build that in from the start, because switching to any new tool is going to have some bumps, like whether it's from the software itself or the onboarding process. You know, you maybe not as fast as you are with it up front, but you know, that's okay. So I think building in that failure rate from the start and letting people know that it's safe to try these things and they're not going to get in trouble for it. And in fact, you know, they're going to get in trouble for not trying new things, really, I think is the message to send. So I think that's really critical too. So hypnotize. So I can't emphasize this enough. Just talk with your team. Like, again, I think a lot of people just internalize this stuff and just have self-talk where it's like, oh man, I wish I could use this thing. Like, when will someone change it? You know, they're just talking to themselves, just getting really worked up. Just talk to your team about it and see if they've been thinking about the same things. There's a good chance that they probably have. But not even just the designers or the discipline specific person. You know, my team at work, as you may or may not know from previous talks, Tundra is split up into two teams. We're the same company, but we have two sets of clients, all that sort of thing. So my team, the Brown family, named after our Lord and Savior, Andy Brown in the audience, is really the key place to talk about this stuff. So they're not all designers, but every day I will be posting something about Figma. I've been doing this for like 2 months and everyone's, I'm sure, sick of it by now. But you know, at least they're aware of it and they're thinking about it. And we've had really good discussions about it. So I think it's just about educating people as often as possible and really just keeping that communication every single day. So when I'm in the kitchen making breakfast at work, I'll grab the designers, we'll just have like a 10-minute chat. And that is just like really critical, I think. And actually one of the things recently as a sort of solid example was the DesignOps handbook released by Envision and the designbetter.co sort of side of that. When we sent that around in the morning, I think all the designers like jumped on it. We had such good discussions the next morning. Everyone was so amped up like about DesignOps and about this kind of way of thinking. And yeah, they wanted to jump on board and see how we can change these things. So this is a quote from Elliot Midson, who's in the front row. Elliot, wave. Yeah. So this was what I would call, when I talked about critical mass before, Elliot is a senior digital designer at Tundra. And when I talked about getting that critical mass, having someone like Elliot give this kind of endorsement, to me was really, I truly felt like it was a bit of a tipping point. Like, I think he's someone who, you know, I obviously respect his opinion, and him sending me a message like this, I literally just linked him to, there's another really good article from Deliveroo. They talked about their experience with Figma recently. I'd highly recommend reading that article too. But I got this message, so he said, I'm sold. I migrated my portfolio design to it last night. So good. Hashtag fuck sketch. How inappropriate, Elliot. But anyway, if you ignore the bottom bit, it's actually a really, really good sign of kind of 2 months of persistence of trying to get these conversations and things happening at work. So, Big Poppa. So I guess I'm talking about management or senior people in the team. Of course, this seems to be a very easy excuse to make. Oh, my boss won't let me or whatever. It's really self-defeating. And again, you're all internalizing this. You probably haven't even talked to them about it if you're being honest with yourself. And I guess my approach to this would be very similar to the first talk I gave here about sort of affecting change or bringing in things that you believe into a team. And again, this doesn't have a 100% success rate, but for me, it's proven to be the most effective way of conveying value. So you really want to make whatever you're doing, whatever you're proposing, make it 10 times better. So not 10%, 10 times better. And a 10x improvement of anything, any metric is very, very hard to argue with or ignore completely. Like you might get some pushback, that's great. Like you're having a conversation about it. But if you can put that work in yourself and you've shown that you've gone above and beyond in your own time or at work or researched this at home and actually demonstrated it to someone and showed that it is 10 times better in whatever metric you're measuring, I think that's going to give you a really, really good shot at least getting that built-in failure rate from your design managers or your higher ups as well. So I'd really recommend that approach. So suicidal thoughts. Again, I think this has come out of my own discussions with designers from lots of different companies that I've talked to. It's a really common theme. Again, that self-defeating attitude, that feeling like nothing is ever going to change, or you're waiting for something to happen, or you're waiting for someone else to make that change. I just never really understand that. Like, no one else is going to do it. If you got that envelope I was handing around before, I've kind of described this in more detail, so you can have a read of that later. But like, no one is going to save you. So as soon as you realize that, and you realize it's actually up to you, that's probably a good frame of mind to have. And for anyone who's stopping these things from happening, or these discussions from happening, the sad truth is, it's not actually that sad. It's probably for the best for the person. But from my experience, the best people will quit. So they won't put it up with it for too long. They'll quit and they'll find somewhere else that will offer this. So I know people in this room who have literally quit their job in the last 6 months because their company was, still on Photoshop, or just something that they couldn't see changing in the near future. So the best will quit. And even worse is the rest will stay and they'll be dead inside. So the ones who just are like really, really on the other extreme of this, and they don't feel like they have any power to change anything, they'll be the ones that stay there, and they'll be learning to live with those subpar processes or subpar tools, and they'll just be dead inside and they won't actually say anything, and the work's going to suffer, their creative souls are going to suffer, their integrity goes out the window. So the real life implications of not being able to have these discussions or not being able to try new things actually has bigger impacts than just, this little tool is something someone wants to try, but we're not going to let them, sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's quite important. So I alluded to this before. So this is back to getting in touch with the Figma marketing person, Sarah. So I added a little PS when I emailed her, and I was sort of asking if there was any way they could send out some merch or whatever. And I said, by the way, like, we've got this community, and I want to give them the best possible chance of being able to try Figma, or try and at least see what it's like working with their team in Figma in a more unrestricted way. So they never do like free trials or like, special deals or affiliate codes or anything like that. But they actually went above and beyond. I can't thank them enough for how supportive they've been overall, but they went above and beyond, and they've actually worked out a way where we all get 1 month of free premium from Figma. So that's not just us, that's the entire meetup group. So they're giving away, like 550 plus free premium trials, which I'll send out tomorrow morning. So I hope that allows you guys to go back to your agency or go back to your studio and share this with your teammates and actually have the full Figma experience and try it and see how it affects your workflow. And obviously it's not going to work for everyone, but I think having the best possible chance at seeing how it could work is probably a good idea. So yeah. So that's about it. I had lots more to say, but it's a lightning talk. I wasn't even going to give the talk. I came up with the title on Sunday morning and thought that it warranted a talk. So, and I did want to talk about this kind of stuff, but I will be following the Figma API stuff very, very closely and updating everyone with what I personally find and where this stuff's going. And we're just going to keep following this until it actually happens, basically. So yeah, thank you.